All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris, and today I am back with another video here. I have a very special guest here on the show, Marc Farzetta, the host of the Farzy Show. Farzy, how are you? Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. How have you been?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on, and I'm happy I could be special. Who's your last special guest? Can I ask that?
Well, I've had a lot of guys on actually. Yeah.
Were they special though?
But no, I mean, honestly, all jokes aside, Farzy, seriously, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. Today,
my pleasure, bud.
Today talking some Flyers hockey, talking some puck, as Farzy said, as we joined the StreamYard. It's been a while, Farzy. It's been a while for the Flyers since they've had a team where there's been a lot of hype around them. I feel like this year there's a good amount of hype around this team because of all the offseason moves and things like that. So kind of going into the preseason, and as you know, we've seen 2 preseason games have played. What have your thoughts been on just offseason moves as a whole? And if you had to give it a certain grade, what would you give it?
Grade wise, I'd probably give them a B plus. I mean, I can't go into the A range. I mean, they made new moves that they needed to make. They needed to bring in more experience on the defensive end to play in front of Carter Hart, because you don't want Carter Hart learning the ropes of the NHL as the guys in front of him are learning the ropes in the NHL. And I feel like that's what you really suffered with last year, which is why you allowed the most goals in the NHL. So Getting older in that regard, bringing in more experienced guys, bringing in Ellis, bringing in Yandel, excuse me, bringing in Ristolainen, for instance. You needed experience, you needed age on the blue line. So I think that's what's going to help Carter Hart a lot this year. Now, you used the word hype a second ago. It's weird. I feel like most people are looking at this not with hype and not with like a great anticipation, but I feel like they're looking at it with this better work. You know, like people did, like some people, and not that Myers was going to be anything special, but some people liked Myers playing on the blue line for this team. They liked what he was able to bring to the table with his speed, and he was one of your better defensemen. But this better work in terms of, all right, Jake Voracek's out. The next guy, Cam Atkinson, for instance, he better work. Like, this better be the change that Flyers fans have been asking for really since Ron Hextall left. I mean, even before then, you were talking about almost a process type era with Ron Hextall, not really doing much at the trade deadline because you were trying to build things for the future, not really doing much in the offseason, again, because you were trying to build things for the future, waiting out or holding out hope for the younger guys to really come through because you were trying to build for the future. These are the first kind of win now moves that the Flyers have made in the Chuck Fletcher era as the general manager of this hockey team. They brought in guys, Broussard, for instance, who's got a history here with Alain Vigneault. So they brought in guys that I know will enjoy and have played in his style before. So I think they made a series of moves that they needed to make. As far as whether or not this will make them get out of the first round of the playoffs in a non-COVID season, we'll see. But I'm hoping it all works out. I'm certainly rooting for that to happen. I think they've definitely gotten better than what they were last year.
Yes.
The unfortunate thing is that wasn't very difficult to do.
And that's the thing, because I feel like last year, if you looked at the team, you said, this team on paper is not bad, but on the ice, it was the problem. And I think you could say that about this team too. Yeah, they've drastically, gotten better on paper, but is it going to, is that going to fade over to the ice? We'll see. But overall, I mean, we've seen 2 games get played already. And if you followed training camp at all, there was, obviously, Alain Vigneault had said he wants to kind of stick to the way that things have kind of worked with the Lions and what they've done in camp. So Tuesday's game was essentially Group A from training camp, guys like Giroux, Couturier, Konechny, things like that. And then Group B, which was Group A was Team Orange in the scrimmage that the Flyers had, and then Group B was Black for that scrimmage as well. So they kind of kept everything together for these 2 games that just played, the game last night against Boston and then the Tuesday game against the Islanders. If you were to look at that, first I should ask, did you catch any of those games? Were you able to watch any?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah. No, see, here's the thing. Like, doing sports radio, doing my show now, like, sports radio doesn't lend itself, for whatever reason, to a big hockey conversation, unfortunately. And that's just the way it is. But like doing what I do now, like I've always been a huge Flyers fan. I will say NHL wide, I'm probably not the biggest fan, but when it comes to Flyers hockey, certainly I grew up as a huge Flyers fan. I was a guy that was, me and my buddies were calling each other back before text messages existed. We're calling each other. Did you see that goal by Lindros? John Leclerc, did you see that? His third straight 50-goal season like that. Like that's kind of how I grew up. Very much a huge Flyers fan. So yeah, I watched the preseason games. Bad deflection against Carter Hart in the first game. Rough go of it last night. It was good to see Farabee, Joel Farabee, be able to light the lamp a couple of times back when they used to light the lamp. But it was good to see that. So yeah, no, I watched the games, paid attention to the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, kind of just to go off of that, what were your thoughts from both games? If you were to kind of break it down and kind of have some thoughts, I personally thought, I feel like your stars look good in both games. The guys you expected from Group A to play well, played well. I thought Hart looked good. I think you could also say Samuel Ersson, who's most likely going to be the backup goaltender down in Lehigh Valley. Yeah. I thought he looked good in his showing against the Islanders as well. I thought he made a handful of good saves. I feel like both goals in that Islanders game that they give up, I don't really want to count the overtime one because I think if you replay that would go a completely different way. But both goals that were screens in front of your goaltender with like 3-4 guys in front, it's kind of hard to pick that up. Last night's game, as for the goaltending side of it, if I were to look at Jones, he didn't have the best outing. Obviously the Flyers took, I believe, 6 penalties, so that obviously wasn't the best either. And also you had, the 2 power play goals, which were breakdowns from Boston early, and then they ended up splitting the game, and then Jones gave up kind of a weird one on the Carlo shot. And that actually got I believe AV said it post game that deflected off of Sandin and went high. It wasn't supposed to go as high as it did. So that also deflected as well. So Jones didn't have the best showing. Obviously the Flyers kind of struggled offensively last night because you didn't have many offensive guys in the game, which is probably part of the reason why Farabee scored twice. But just to break it down, what are your thoughts?
Overall consistency. I mean, I know it's only 2 games, but I saw what you wanted to see from guys like Giroux, for instance. Like you see the same old, not the same old, but like you see the pass first mentality still from him. That's to be expected from Claude Giroux. Right. You're hoping that with things changing a little bit with Jake Voracek no longer being here, you hope consistency wise, you see some of these lines stick together for a lot longer than what you saw last year. I felt like last year you saw Alain Vigneault start to mix and match. So when I saw what was going on in camp with kind of keeping those groups together that you just described, I was thinking about it like, all right, hopefully this is the start of letting these guys build that chemistry, especially when you're going to be looking at a guy like Giroux, who you can't just mix and match with Voracek. You can't just mix and match with Sean Couturier. You got to really, whatever you decide to do in the early goings, stick with it for a while. So I'm hoping that's a taste of things to come in seeing how they're breaking out of camp into these preseason games. So that's what I'm excited to see. And that's kind of what I noticed early on, that I'm hoping that this consistency kind of rings through. Defensively, it's going to take a minute for these guys to start to learn how to play together, and I'm willing to give that time. Yeah. When you start to think about the possibility of the defensive pairings that are out there, I'm hoping Alain Vigneault sticks with that for longer than he did last year. Right, the thing is, you're not going to have to worry so much about getting that more veteran guy. And Ivan Provorov, I know he's young, but he's a veteran now. Like now it's no excuses. Like he's got to be one of the premier blue line guys, not just on the Flyers, but in the NHL. Hopefully the guys that they'll pair him with this year for the foreseeable future will help his maturation process even more so. So I am looking at Alain Vigneault more so than even the talent on the team right now and even the new guys on this team. And it's only 2 preseason games. So look, I still have a long way to go and the Flyers still have a long way to go to build that consistency. But that's the number one thing I'm looking for this preseason and going into the regular season is really the head coach and how he organizes that the talent that was acquired by Chuck Fletcher, because we can't forget going into the offseason, one of the things we heard from Chuck Fletcher was how he was going to build this roster with the help of Alain Vigneault. This wasn't a hands-off thing for Alain Vigneault. I mean, the reason guys like Nolan Patrick aren't here anymore, Shane Gostisbehere, even though I'm sure that was more of a unilateral decision throughout the organization, you want to see these guys really start to fall into place under the way Alain Vigneault wants to organize them. And I'm hoping he knows how to do that this year a lot better than he did last year, considering the guys are guys that he helped bring in.
Exactly. And kind of just to go off of that, I personally think this year is a big year, obviously with the defense. I know I touched more on the offensive goaltending there, but For the defense, they've kept that pretty much the same as well. I feel like the Provorov-Ellis pairing is probably going to be very similar to him with Niskanen. You're not really going to see much of a breakup there. I think the only time that pair was broken up in that season was when Niskanen was actually suspended in the playoff game against Montreal. I think that was one of the only times.
I forgot about that.
That was probably it. If I'm going to look at defense, I think the Flyers, if you look at that Sanheim-Ristolainen pairing, I think last year one of the biggest problems was the humongous question mark you had at that second pair last year. Who did you put there? I mean, you had Justin Braun starting the season playing top pair minutes, and Braun at 34 years old cannot do that. Mm-hmm. So, and that's nothing against Braun. That's just how it is. So I think a lot of this year for the Flyers really depends on if that Sanheim and Ristolainen pairing can stay together and gel together. I think last night they had a pretty solid game. I felt like, again, last night you were very short on NHL veterans and guys that you would see play. And also the Flyers were on the road, which is a good part of the preseason. But I think just kind of to go off that today's group at practice, and the reason I kind of started this was because today's group at practice is different. There's a mix of guys from Group B, mix some guys from Group A. So for the forwards, the 13 forwards you have at 12:30 today for practice are Konechny, Couturier, Brassard, Lawton, Lindblom, James Van Riemsdyk, Giroux, Thompson, Frost, Albie Kubel, Elliot Dunoyer, Joel Farabee, and Cam Atkinson. Now, Atkinson did have a maintenance day the other day, so they said he would be there today, which is kind of weird to me why he had a maintenance day, but anyway.
32 years old. 32. He's breaking down all right. No, I get that. I feel like once you go through a full off season, once you start getting the body going again, you're going to need those maintenance days. So, yeah. And here's the other thing. He's one of the rarities that's a score first type of guy.
Yeah.
So I know he's not a 40-goal scorer. Yeah, I know he's not a 40-goal scorer like he was a couple of years ago. But he's going to be type of those guys, and I hate this expression, but he's going to be one of those guys you look at that will need those maintenance days. He'll need that load management, as they say in the NBA world nowadays. I'm willing to do that because it's a very rare trait that he has that a lot of guys on this hockey team don't have, which is why I'm happy he's here.
Right. And then kind of just to go off that as well, the defense was Yandel, Sanheim, Provorov, Nick Seeler, who's actually impressed in 2 of the games he's played, York, Braun, Ristolainen, and Ellison. Their goaltenders are Jones and Hart. So again, I feel like this Saturday game, again, it's a home game for the Flyers, so you're going to see more veterans in. I think this is the game where you see some different lineup combinations. Obviously, Sean Couturier is playing for the first time, and he's most likely going to be playing on Saturday. That would be my guess. But if you were to maybe just have a full set lineup for the Flyers, maybe your dream lineup of all the guys that you could put together this year, right, for this team right now, what would you kind of say that it would be?
With the guys that are currently on the roster, or they're like all time here? Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the roster right now.
To me, I know Giroux has played well in the wing, and he's enjoyed that. When I've talked to him about playing the wing again, he just enjoys like kind of the freedom of it. Center, he feels like he has to set up everything, but I don't mind him out on that spot. I don't mind him being a guy that should be thinking more about scoring goals as opposed to setting up other players. I wish he would play with, I hate to say the weight of the world on his shoulders, but I'd love to see him out there. I'd love to see Sean Couturier center that line and stay there. Cam Atkinson, I'd like to see there be there as your number one guy so that you could just unload in that regard. When you come to the defensive pairings, Provorov and Yandel is one that I am rooting for, and I'm hoping that sticks together for a long time because I think that Yandel has that experience that you want to see rub off on a guy who's still maturing as Ivan Provorov. I think when you look at guys like Abe Kubel, for instance, I think you can put him down in the lineup as your second line, and I think you can have him play phenomenally well when you're able to do things with him that can be aggressive, when you're able to have him play up in the zone. You don't have to worry about him playing too much on the defensive end of things. I know he's not supposed to be a defensive forward by any means, but he's the type of guy that can play aggressive. He's the type of guy that isn't afraid to go into the corner to dig out a puck, and he's not afraid to go towards the net. He's very versatile in that regard. I think if you see him with a guy like Scott Lawton, I think that's another line that could actually do a lot of damage this year because not a lot of guys in the NHL are willing to outwork the attitude of those guys. And I think with a guy like Kubel, I think he can have that goal scorer's mentality. So I think if you put the hustle of Lawton and him on the same line, I think you could have guys like that crashing the net and making sure that they're scoring goals for this hockey club.
Yeah, definitely. No, I 100% agree. I think one line that we've seen in camp and they've kept it together was Lawton on the wing, did Nate Thompson at center, which has been fantastic.
Yeah.
And then you also have Albie Kubel. So Albie Kubel did that last year, but the problem is that he took way too many stupid penalties, and that was the thing. He led the team. I think he led the team in penalty minutes, if I can remember. I really don't want to remember anything about that season, but but yeah, I mean, again, I agree. I think for the most part, I think if the Flyers can just have a set lineup where you kind of keep these lines together. I know I kind of weirded the question, like the way I worded the question was very weird, and you kind of looked at me like, holy shit.
Well,
like,
I mean, I was like, okay, yeah, John LeClaire, Eric Desjardins on defense. Who else we got here? Like I'd go through all the guys in my childhood. But no, I was like, no, but the lineups that we've gone over, lineup that we've discussed as far as attitude, as far as playing under Alain Vigneault, I think those are all things that we can look at for another reason, aside from the new talent brought in. Guys taking the next step forward. Yeah. I think the guys that have been brought in will allow these guys to take that next step forward without feeling like they have to take every step for this hockey team.
Yeah, no, I personally, I 100% agree. I think it's gonna be a good year for the Flyers. I think there's gonna be a lot of buzz around this team, especially with everything that's been going on with Philly sports now and the whole thing with Simmons and the Phillies getting eliminated last night with the Braves, and you know, obviously the Eagles are still doing well, but you know they're holding on, but. Farzy, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. If you want to just throw a couple links, or not a couple links, but where people can follow you, where they can find your stuff, and where they can see you on your show.
Yeah, no worries, man. Yeah, sure. Thanks. At Farzy Show. You can follow me on Twitter at Farzy Show. Follow me personally at Marc Farzetta. The Farzy Show is a digital sports show across all digital media platforms, YouTube most notably. Also, you can watch the show every day on Twitter. It's the beautiful thing about the digital world. You do one episode live, or as you know, in the podcast world, in the web show world, we say new episode drops every day, 6 a.m. live, and then it's available for download and other digital consumption, whatever's on by 7:30. So feel free to consume the content however you see fit.
Awesome. All right, guys. Remember, guys, podcast articles, those links are on my channel. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.